In the military, there's obviously a lot of difficult tasks that you're asked to perform. Um, you know, the way that you approach those, a lot of times, there isn't a whole lot of room for personal choice, and pros and cons to that. Um, you in a lot of ways you're just forced to grow as a person, um, which is obviously a good thing, but you you're not really in a lot of ways learning the self-discipline of how to do that once you're in school or in a civilian setting where no one's going to force you to do it. And so how you really spend the time deciding how to approach these things, which are difficult, which are not just 150 pounds of gear and weapons for 15 miles on a hike or a firefight or whatever it is, where a lot of these things you're not having to, you just have to do it in that situation. And there's no real personal choice. The stakes in a lot of ways in the civilian setting are much lower. And so it can be difficult to really to think about it in a way where it's like, well, I have to do this because no one's life is on the line. It's school.
My first semester at Columbia, I decided that I was going to do everything. I was a poli-sci and econ major, and economics, for whatever reasons, didn't dawn on me at the moment. That was going to require a lot of math. And so when I took my placement testing, I needed to take what was considered a remedial math. And so it was a calculus class. And I had not had any math in the 8 years that I'd had as a break from university, and probably more than 10 years since I'd had any in high school. And it was a very difficult class for me. The professor that I had was actually a grad student. And so, for him, this was his major. It was very easy. And I think there was a little disconnect on what was easy for him was clearly not easy for me. I watched the C's come across my desk, horrified every moment that I was going to fail this class. There was also the feeling of failure. This was my first semester. I was carrying all of this great responsibility of the pride of my family, my community college. Oh my goodness, I'm going to wash out my first semester if I fail this one course. And so it was very difficult for me to figure out how to get through it. And so I ended up finding resources on campus for tutoring. They had this place called Millbank Hall here that was really effective. That helped me. I was able to get in touch with other students that I had come in with in my class. There's a friend of mine named Dan who said, hey, I actually grade all those homework assignments. And so I'm super, good at math, and I can absolutely help you, behind the scenes to try and help get you ready for this. And it was a course that I scrabbled through into the very end, talking to my advisor, oh my gosh, can I drop it? What's gonna happen? And it was the best C that I ever got. And I was so proud of myself because I think it was a testament of whether or not I was going to stick it out in university, because it was the first time in a long time that I'd actually struggled with something and it didn't come easy for me. And I'm so grateful now that I didn't hide at the first sign of trouble, and then I did have the resources and supports that let me know that it was, a class and it was a moment and it wasn't going to define the rest of my time at my university, because I recently graduated. And I had a really wise advisor once who, when I said, oh my goodness, I'm really struggling with this, and I just got a C, he's told me, well, a C, it's a point. And so I'm not concerned because it's a point. And he said, but if you have 2 C's, I might get a little concerned because, now we have a line. But I'm still not concerned yet because it's just 2 points. But when we get 3 points, he said, that's a pattern, and that's when I'll get concerned. And I just never let it become a pattern. And so that would be my advice when you struggle with something. Understand that it's a moment, but just don't let it become a pattern and you'll be fine.
I think one of the greatest things that I learned in the military that has helped me in college is the fact that, anytime you encounter something that is extremely mentally challenging, you can get through it. You can persist. You are stronger than you think you are. And I learned that so many times throughout college. There were times that I just felt like I needed to quit, that I could not persevere. But you know, I kept on, and I really took advantage of mental health resources and my advisor, and I kept taking little steps forward. And you know, those little steps got me to the finish line. It's not always necessary to make big, sweeping advancements in whatever you're learning. Sometimes it's just about baby steps. I took an incredibly intense physics course that just absolutely rocked me. And the best way that I got through this was just sitting down with a tutor, going through little tiny things, and just learning it kind of step by step. And it took a lot of effort mentally, but that's how I got through it, you know, little by little.
You're used to being a high performer. I'm definitely guilty of it, where you know, you find tasks that are difficult, you're able to throw yourself into them, and you excel. And you know, even if you're not the best, you're not the gold medalist, you know, you were at the Olympics, and so you feel good about that. But then you come up against something, for me specifically, that was French. I don't hear very well, and I didn't, you know, my education was a little squirrely growing up, and so I didn't end up having to take language in school, and so I'd never had to learn a language before. I didn't know a lot of the grammatical terms. It was just this flood of information that I couldn't hear well, and it's a requirement for getting my degree, and I just didn't have the option not to do it. And you know, instead of, there wasn't a way for me to choose to take something easier or whatever, try though I may have, I just had to grind it out. And so the way that you approach that with this sort of, you know, if you have this fixed mindset of, you know, this is what my natural abilities are and my capacities are, and I can't do French, or I'm not a math person, or whatever it is, versus coming into something understanding that, you know, okay, you didn't know anything about blowing up tanks either before they started teaching you about it in the military, you know, and so that's okay, and kind of checking the ego, leaving it aside, understanding, you know, being willing to, you know, have more of a growth mindset where you're saying, okay, this is what my natural capacities are currently, but this is something I can train. This is something I can improve. And, you know, by really putting in the time and understanding how other people approach this when they have difficulties, asking other, you know, students at school, asking your academic advisors, saying, you know, where can I get tutoring? How do I do this better? And spend my time more wisely in approaching this material, because it's sucking up 6 hours of my day and I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. How do I do this better? Realizing that that's something that you're going to have to do, and you don't improve if you don't put in the work.
Once I got to my 4-year university, I decided to study psychology. I've always been attracted to it. I find it fascinating. Lucky for me, it was actually really science heavy. We had to analyze a lot of data, we had to create experiments, analyze those experiments. There were a lot of exams that we had to take. It wasn't just sort of writing essays. So it was quite challenging. And at times I felt like I really wasn't a science person. I still don't think I'm a science person, but I realized that I can be a science person if I want. I just have to strategize. And this makes me think of, like, in the military, like, I'm not good at pull-ups, but I still have to do them. In the military, I had to do them, and they were painful. But in academia, if you're actually not good at exams, you actually don't have to necessarily take them. You can actually search out courses that require you to maybe write papers instead, if that's what you're actually strong at. So I think that in any of the studies that people might feel like that's not them, that's not in their nature, biology, chemistry, neuroscience. I took neuroscience, and I got a B. I think if you strategize and you really cash in on your strengths, you're gonna go that much further, and you can actually do those things that you never thought you were capable of doing.
Growth mindset to me is having the ability to tell yourself, going into something incredibly difficult, that I can do this. And if I work hard enough, I will do it, and I'll succeed at it. It's the same feeling, at least I know most Marines feel when they graduate boot camp. They finish, it's likely the hardest thing they've ever done, and now they really feel like they can do anything. And they go on to show up to the Fleet Marine Force, and then they go to more schools, and they continue to have this feeling over and over again. But this really is, it's most often a physical thing, and at the university you can have that same experience. For me, it was studying Arabic and engaging in something that I had no experience in, and it was incredibly difficult. But since starting and realizing that I can do it, I was empowered. In fact, I've gone from feeling that I would never do something in the STEM world to majoring in computer science and working in a research lab. So I've gone from the humanities, gained this growth mindset, and realized that I want to do something else and I can do something else. So the growth mindset has really pushed me into a whole nother discipline.
Choosing to have that mindset of being more adaptable, and it's, you said the Darwin quote is what everyone always says, it's only the strong survive, but the actual quote was the species that's most capable of adaptation is the most likely to survive. Improvise, adapt, overcome, the same thing in the military, but it's, if you have this rigid concept of self that is, this is what I am, you're limiting yourself. And so being willing to, again, kind of check the ego, sit with it and say, oh, I'm really bad at this. And being realistic about that and figuring out, instead of just woe is me, I'll do something else, you push yourself and figure out how to do it better, learn how to do it. And then you can look back and, well, I might not be fluent in French, but I can sort of cobble some sentences together, and I could, I know what that means when I'm reading something in a book that has a French quote, and it's, so really putting the time in, but choosing to have that mindset to, not being complacent after, I did the hard part of my life, I was in the military, and everything else I'm just going to kind of skate forward. You continue to try and really push yourself and grow as a person to do great things, because if, again, no one's going to push you to do it. So you have to put yourself in those rooms, in those situations that allow you to do those things, but also consciously, on a consistent basis, making the choice to do so.